Not a great deal is known about Dirk Hartog. We know that he was born into a seafaring family. His father was a sailor or a merchant, and his sisters married sailors, and his brother Willem was a ship's carpenter. Hartog himself was married but had no children. We know that he died in 1621, but we know very little else. Perhaps he became ill on his last voyage to the East Indies. We know a little more of his working life and of course the voyage that took him to Australia in 1616. Hartog had already spent years at sea in Europe trading in wheat and other goods, and for the Dutch East India Company as a navigator. He was appointed captain of the ship Eendracht in 1616. The Eendracht left Amsterdam with 4 other ships on a voyage to the East Indies. Now, the attraction for the East Indies to the Dutch was the trade in spice, and it's difficult for us to imagine today how valuable spices were. Spices such as cardamom, cloves, cinnamon, pepper were valuable in food preparation, perfumes, medicine, and their value outweighed gold at times. On the islands of the East Indies too, there were precious metals such as silver, gold, tin and copper. And by the early 1600s, the Dutch were regularly sending fleets east. Now, the voyage to Australia involved fleets sailing around the Cape of Good Hope, further south to reach the easterly trade winds. This would take them across the Indian Ocean for about 1,000 miles, where they were instructed to turn north or northeast, either going to India or to the East Indies. Unfortunately, the ship became separated from the rest of the fleet on the coast of Africa. Hartog's ship overshot the turning point and became, as a result, the first ship to encounter the west coast of Australia. Up to now, many in Europe thought a Southland existed based on early geographical theories, and until Hartog's voyage, no one in Europe knew of Australia's existence. Hartog landed on this island at the south of Shark Bay in October 1616. He and his chief merchant explored the waters of Shark Bay and finally left without discovering anyone to trade with or water. They did, however, leave a postal inscription, a plate atop a post which was driven into the top of Dirk Hartog Island. It isn't known if Hartog's arrival in Western Australia was accidental or deliberate. Unfortunately, the ship's logs are lost, and we're left to speculate perhaps Hartog did consider a voyage to the Southland. Hartog's Eendracht and all subsequent Dutch shipping that ended up in these waters played a major role in the reconnaissance and mapping of the Australian mainland. Few Dutch place names remain on the map of Australia. The Dutch created virtual colonies: Leeuwinsland, Eendrachtland, Van Diemen's Land. The remaining Dutch place names, such as Dirk Hartog's Island, Delfts Bay and Swan River, are a few of those that remain. And of course, New Holland became the name by which Australia was known for 150 years. It's thought that perhaps the 200 place names were added to the Australian map as it was in the 1600s, and only a few of those survived because the Dutch didn't revisit Australia and make more of the opportunities. And there are 5 million place names on the map of Australia now, so you can see that 200 isn't very many. The Dutch, however, have added many more names to the Australian map, and this is because during the Second World War, Australia and the Netherlands were allies in the fight against Japan. Following the war, as Europe rebuilt, many Dutch migrated to Australia and were involved in building and construction industries, professions and trades, and major projects such as the Snowy Mountains hydroelectricity scheme. Housing was particularly difficult, especially for larger families. From 1945, the Commonwealth Government set up camps for Dutch families and other migrants to Australia. And many Dutch migrants spent time in tents or old tram carriages. After school, children were expected to help build the new house or even make bricks until a deposit could be afforded on the new home. Dutch migrants were known for fitting in and covering up social characteristics that some Australians might have called ethnic. Today, there are close to 95,000 Dutch residents in Australia and another 240,000 who claim Dutch parentage. Over the last 50 years, the Dutch have had a huge impact on the building and construction industries and have had a role to play in the scientific, artistic and economic development of the country they now call home.